My name is Stefanie Juchmes and I'm 30 years old. I have studied computer science in the University of Bonn and I got there my Bachelor of Science degree in 2018. And since 2019 I'm working for Monkey Bread Software. I think you all know Monkey Bread. We have now over 3,000 classes that you can use in your Xojo projects. And here you see what I'm talking about today. But before we start with the programming part, we answer the question, what is JSON? JSON is a shorter for JavaScript Object Notation. The origin of JSON can be found in the web programming with JavaScript. JSON is a data format that is used to exchange data between applications. The data can be very complex and especially suitable for multidimensional arrays. We can save a load of data in a JSON document, can query it and transfer data between applications. What we see later in our bigger example. We can present complex data with suitable formatting, relatively clear and readable for humans too and not only for computers. The data structure is very flexible. In this way we can add, change and delete data very easily without changing the data structure considerably. JSON text consists of objects and arrays, and we take a look on this structure in a few moments. But what does the smallest valid JSON look like? It looks like that, an empty object. Of course, we can't do much with it by now, and so we want to fill it with life. An object is filled with elements. And here we see an example of one element in an object. We have on the left side the key and on the right side the value. The key, in our case, it is name, describes what the information does hold. And here we have the value, and this is the value, you know. And the key name is always in quotes. And for the value, it depends on what type it is. And in our case, it is a string, and so we need quotes. And you hear that we have more than one type. So what are the other types? And here we have a list. We have here the string that is can hold text. And we have the data type number. And you see here you don't need quotes. And number is not, it's only number, and you need not distinction between integer or double. So all of that is number. And then we have Boolean values, true and false. And you see here also you don't use quotes, because if you would use quotes, you have a string again. Then we have the data type null. The null data type is a placeholder. And it is so you can, for example, have a special structure in your JSON, and so you can use it as a placeholder and then set the value of this key later. And then we have objects, and an object can hold an object anyway. So you can nested your informations, so you can have more than one level, and we see it later in the example that it is very useful. And we can have arrays, but about arrays a bit later. A single piece of information in an object is not yet fun at all, or useful. For this reason, we want now to have more than one element in an object, and we realize it by separating them with comma. And you can see here, we have here the name key and the first name key, and both elements are separated by a comma. Like in Xojo, the arrays represent in square brackets, and the elements are separated by comma too. The special thing about the arrays in JSON are that they can hold different types in the same time in the same array. So for example, your array can hold at first in the first element a number, and then in the second element you can have true or false, a true or false value, a Boolean value, or so on. Additional arrays can have entries of type objects or arrays again, so we can nested them too. Here we see that we add to our person the hobbies in an array. So we have here programming, meditation, and taking photos. And we have mentioned earlier that we can also set other objects as values. Because of that, we imagine that I have a dog. And that dog has its own properties, like name, age, and if you like treats. What could that look like? Here we have the solution. We have here our key dog. And then we have here our object with the information to this dog. The single elements in this object are separated by comma anyway. And we see here also different types. For example, bellow is a string, the 6 is a number, and here we have a Boolean value for true. But I'm not the only person on this wonderful world. And so we want to have a second person in our JSON, and it is Sam Miller. He loves cooking, writing, and watching TV, and has a dog who names Lily, has an age of 2, and likes treats also. So, how can we combine these two objects in one JSON? And this we do with an array. We define a key names persons, and then we have here our array with the two objects inside as elements, and they separated by comma. And so you can nest them. And if we have a third person, we would also add it after the last person with a comma, and then put the object there as a new entry of the array. If we want to work with JSON in Xojo with onboard functionalities, we have two methods and one class to do this. The method generateJSON can generate JSON text out of an existing directory or an array of directories. Dictionaries, yes. Sorry, dictionaries. Sorry, dictionary. And the method parseJSON does the opposite and generate dictionaries, arrays from a JSON text. But for us, the most interesting thing is the class JSON item. With this class, we can change, query, and add or delete objects, information from a JSON item. And we talk a lot, but the proof of the pudding is the eating. And so we have a look on an example. This is for later. Yeah. And we see here, do you see enough? So we see here we have an input field and an output field and a lot of buttons, and we will look on the code of these buttons in a moment. So we start. And at first we use a generate JSON function method. And here we see the script, here we see the, okay. So here we see the code. At first we make an array of dictionaries and fill this array of dictionaries with some dictionaries. Here we have at first Jenny and her age. This is one dictionary, and here we write the information into our input field. And here we have the dictionary John with an age of 23. And here comes our generate JSON function. It gets the array of the dictionaries. And here we have the value true because we want our JSON output formatted. So we have some blanks inside, white spaces inside, so we can read it much better. So we see here, we have here an array, a JSON array out of our dictionary arrays. At first with Jenny as an object, and here as John as an object. Then we want to use the parseJSON method, and for that we use this little JSON object with name, age, and the pet. And here we see at first we create the dictionary out of the parseJSON method, and it gets as parameter the input text. Also, that means we put here our JSON in, and then we can query the single values from the dictionary to see that it is filled. And here we have our answer. We have here our John, the 22, and the cat. So you can use it to convert. So you can use these methods to convert. So, but we want to work with the other functions that with the other functionalities that I show you with a bigger JSON. So we have here our JSON that we see in our presentation before, and it's look very messy. because they have not additional white spaces on the right places. So we can format it, and the formattation of JSON is very easy in Xojo. So we see it here. At first, we make out of our input text, our JSON, with the constructor of the JSON item class and JSON, and then we set the property compact to false. Compact means that if it would set to true, it would give back a JSON that had no additional white spaces, so we see it before, but we want white spaces because we want to read it, and so we set here the false. So then we resume, and here we see that our JSON is more readable. And now we want to query the first. We want to query the name of the first person, and in this case it is Juchmes. And how we can do that, we see here. Sorry. Here, at first, we also use the constructor to make a new JSON item out of our input text. And then we search away through the JSON, and we see here here is the target that we want, and here we have the path with which we can reach this value. And we have two functions that are very useful to guide through the levels of JSON. That is at first child and the child add function. And here at first we use the child function because we want a part of the JSON from a specific key. And so here it is child of persons, and then we go to persons, and in the debugger we see that this is another part in the presentation where we can see it, and here it would hold now our array, and then we want to go to our first element in the array. And this is the first person. And then we want in this object of the first person the name. And we can see it here. It is Juchmes. And if we run it, we see it is perfectly performed. But another thing we can see here is that we have that we can not only query the value, we can also query, for example, the count of the keys that are used in the level or that we have here. And in this case, we want the count of the childs or of the. Sorry, I searched the words. We want the how many keys are in this object, and we have here name, first name, hobbies, and the dog, and so our answer would be 4. But what can we do with this information now? We want to query the second hobby of the last person in this JSON, and in this case it is Sam Miller, but we want that this code also work if we had, for example, Jen Smith at a third person. So how we can do this with the information we have by now. We have here our persons, and here you can see that it holds the array. Sorry, wrong. It is holding the array now, and we want to count how many objects are in there. And that's our 2 objects. And so we can set here as our index the count -1. So we get the result that we want. And here we see also the path. At first, we run to persons, and then we go to our array, go to the last person, and then we go to the hobbies. And in this array, we want the second element. So we can see that it is writing, and here our son Miller has writing as the second hobby. We can go 1 level deeper with the dog. You can see it here. So I think it is also the same that you find your way here. At first go to persons, then go to the first child, then go to the key dog, and then we go to the name of the dog. And it will returns us below. Yeah. But we can not only query information from a JSON, we can also set information into a JSON. So we want to change the name of Sam's dog. And here we see that we have a similar way than the query. We use the same methods. But this time we assign a value, and so it is the same way that you can use. And here you can assign the name Jimmy. And we see here that our Jimmy is set as the dog name. We set here the name with a capital N, but what will happen when we do it with a lowercase n? And you can see it here, that here we set a lowercase n and not an uppercase n than before. So we test it, and we see we have here the old name, Lily, and we have here a name with lowercase n with the new value, Jimmy. And so you must pay attention about that JSON is case sensitive. And this is very important because you run into very strong errors if you don't think about it. So we want to add another person to our JSON, so we add Jane, and we can see here how we does that. At first, we also use our input JSON as a new JSON item, And then we create a second new item that calls new person, and this new person JSON item we fill with information, and we see with the name before that you create keys by using them. And so we set only the key name with the value Smith and the first name with the name Jane. And so they exist. Then we want to add the array of hobbies. We can't set an array in such an easy way that the other informations. For this, we need a search JSON item, and this JSON item holds an array. And we have here an empty array, and then we fill it with information like dancing, motorcycling, and listening music with the method add. And then we set then we go to new person and set the key hobbies with the new array. Then we want to add the dog to our JSON item, and for that we also create a new JSON item and fill with the informations about the dog. And then we add it to the new person again. And because we want to add the new person object to the original JSON to an array, so we use the add method again and add it to this array into the JSON. And you can see it here, that it is working, and here we have our new object with Jane Smith. And if we copy this text, earlier we say that the get second hobby of the last person would also work with the third person, so we can test it. And we got, at this time, motorcycling, that is the second hobby of Jane.
What happens if a person only has one hobby and you ask for the second one?
It will occur an error. And this not exists, so it's through an it's through an exception. And so, but you see it later in another example.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Okay. So back to the presentation. If you need more functionalities, you can also use plugins to extend your possibilities on JSON with Xojo. Nearly 10 years ago, Monkeybird Software released the JSON MBS class that has now 38 methods and 24 properties that you can use. It was developed to do the work with a better performance than the original built-in JSON functionalities, but the difference melted over the years, and so now it isn't a thing. But the MBS plugin provides you a lot of useful additional functions in connection to JSON anyway. For example, the compare function. With this you can compare two JSONs, or you can convert your JSON to an HTML representation to show it on web, for example. also, there are 3 different plugins from Björn Eriksson from Iceland, from the company Einhugger. And with the JSON plugin 3, for example, you can do schema validation. So if you need this, you will find it there. Now we come to the probably even most common use of JSON, the communication with an API. And API is the shortcut for application programming interface. And in this you can have programs, you can have data streams between 2 applications, to one side or the other side, or into both sides. We have already seen that JSON contains a lot of data, and so it is also quite clear and structured, and it's therefore a good choice for data exchange. Each API has its own special characteristics. That is why you can't say, I know how I can use JSON in an API, and that's it. You must pay attention of this special characteristics. But the most the most huger APIs have a documentation that shows you how you can request to this API and what our return will look like. And for this presentation, I choose the Open Weather Map API. You can query their weather data. And I choose this API because it is very easy to understand. And you get the license key for free there. And so at home you can use the examples too and can test them. So we go to the website to take a look on the documentation. So we go to pricing because we then can enter the documentation better. And you can see here we use the data that is for free. And we go to current weather. And we see that we query our API by an URL. We have here our base URL that is separated by the parameters by the question mark, and then you can set your parameters there. And here we see that we can set the parameters latitude and longitude, but if we think about it, does everybody knows where we have the coordinates for now? It is very hard. So the coordinates for London I don't have present by now, and so we can scroll a bit down and see that we can also use the city name. And here we have 2 parameters that are required. At first, Q with the city name, and then the API key. These curly brackets are only placeholders, and there you later set the data in and use them. But the city and the API key are not the only parameters that we can use. We can also use the parameters mod, units, and lang. and they are optional parameters. Here, for example, mode, we have that if you want your result as XML or HTML in XML or HTML representation, you can set the mode parameter, and then you get it at XML or HTML if you set it. But we want our data as JSON return, so we don't set this parameter. Then we can set units, and in our example we will set this parameter because you can have standard, metric, and imperial. And standard, there we get our temperatures in Kelvin. In metric we get it as Celsius, and in imperial we get it as Fahrenheit. And so we want to use the Fahrenheit temperatures, and so we set units to imperial. Then for the weather description, we can choose another language. For example, you want them in German. You can set it here. You have here the country codes you can use, and there are a lot. I think it was 40 languages roundabout. So, in this documentation we also see an example output from this API, and we see that we have here, for example, the information of the courts. Then we have weather information about rain and moderate rain, and the more detailed description, moderate rain. And then we have the temperatures, the current temperature, the feels-like temperature, do you see it? Moment. The feels-like temperature, and so on. So we also have the wind speed and the wind degree, and we want to use this information now in our application. So we have it here, and we make this smaller because then we can have our JSON next to it. We have here our application that we want to fill with data. We have here a lot of labels that we want to fill. We have here a search field, and here is a search button. And here is the canvas, in which is later an arrow that shows us the wind degree. So we take a look what's behind the search button, and we see here that at first we build up our URL with the base URL, and then at first we test if we type some in the city text field, and then we set here the parameters for the URL, and without curly brackets, so it's only the value. And here we have our API key, and this is in the property, but you must use your own API key if you get this example. Then we set the units and the language to the units to imperial and the language to English. In this case, we use now here in this example the curl MBS method, the curl MBS class, to connect to the API and get the information from the website. So at first we set the option URL, and then we perform the connection and get the output of the data. And this output is our JSON that we get. And here we see that we get our result, that we have here our output data, and we then put it into our own written method, fill data, that gets the JSON as a parameter. Then we go to fill data and see that we build from this text we get back, from this JSON text we get back, we build our JSON item, and then we can query the single informations. We have, at first, we query here the coordinates. You can see we go to chord, and then we go to longitude or to latitude. And then we query the main description of the weather, and that is in the example here it is rain. And we go the way weather, and then we see it as an array, because in some cases it can hold more than one object. And we go to the first object in our case here, and want the main value, that is rain. Then we query the more detailed description that is also in the same level, and it is moderate rain here. But we use the data from the current, data, so it is not moderate rain if we start the example. Then we have an icon here, but if we take a look on it, it's not like image data. It is only a string, and you can find a list in the internet that describes the icon that you can use. But we use our own icons because I like more the emojis items. And you can see that we call here the weather icon method, and we have here a select case statement, and we distinguish here by day and by night. You can see it here on the D and here on the N after the numbers, and the numbers are stands for a specific weather. So here 01N and 01D stands for sunshine, for example. And yeah, so you can go all to this information. I think we see it in the previous example a bit detailed. But something I want to show you is that we can work with the information. We can not only display the information, we can work with the information that we get from the JSON. And for example, we do it with the wind degree. We query here the wind degree. That is a degree, is a number, and the result is a number. We see it here, for example, and this we can show as an arrow in our application, and we use here this at first the scale MBS method to scale it a bit smaller than the borders of the canvas, and then we rotate it with the rotate MBS function, but we multiply with -1 because the function rotate counterclockwise, and we want clockwise rotation. And here we see that we have a try-catch around these queries. because if a key, if a value to the query is not found, we then got a key not found exception, and then we can display the message box city not found. But because there can be a lot more of the exceptions, but because we are in an example, I only filter the most common exception to show it as an example. So we can run it. And we type in London. And we see that we have here clouds, like the most time. And here's the minimum temperature, maximum temperature, humidity, wind speed is 10 meters per hour now, and the degree of the wind is 250, and it's come from north, so that you can see in this application. And for example, we can also query the city of Bonn, that is next to my place. And there is now mist, and yeah, the wind comes from west-north. But what will happen if we type Bonn with 3N, so it is wrong spelled, and we got our exception, city not found. So, because we're running out a bit of time, have you questions?
Well, in your example, you used like MBS plugin, but is it feasible with the Xojo commands only?
This was all what I used in the examples was Xojo. Okay, curl. I use, I think you can use Xojo as well, but for me, I always work with MBS, so I never test the other things.
I understand.
Yes?
With the MBS version of the JSON class, if you do a child act or child function, if the key isn't found, does it in the error message tell you which key is not found?
Christian, do you know that? So the answer is if you do the work with the MBS for JSON, you don't not find a key, so it returns nil and not an exception. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
So you showed how to add an object in the
Yeah.
Can you also remove a whole object in the same way?
I think so, yeah. We have remove functions in Xojo, and you can remove them. Yeah. So I thank you for your attention, and if you want to use the examples and you have questions then you can write me an email, and then I try to help you.